Hello, everyone, and welcome to SuttonsDaze. Today is canning chat day. Seriously, if we ran into each other in town and there was a coffee shop and we could sit down and start talking canning and preparedness, I would never leave. They would have to kick us out at the end of the day. That is how much I love talking about canning and preparedness. And so I appreciate you guys hanging with me, asking me questions so that we can do just that virtually. Today, we have some really great questions from last week's canning chat, so let's get started. Today, Lucy Thomas asks, what's your opinion on the amount of nutrition that is lost during canning, and how much do you think it destroys? And I think this is a really great question, and part of the equation when I'm asked multiple times how long food lasts on the shelf, okay? My standard reply for how long the food lasts on the shelf is, they say 18 months. I say as long as it was sealed, or as long as it was canned properly, is sealed, remains that way, and is stored properly, indefinitely. But what are you getting out of it when you crack it open, right? That's the kicker. So how much nutrition are we losing? I think that is a phenomenal question, and I wanted to make sure to get you the right information. So according to the National Center for Home Food Preservation, properly canned food stored in a cool, dry place will retain optimum eating quality for at least a year. Did you catch that? For at least a year. Canned food stored in a warm place near hot pipes, a range, a furnace, or in indirect sunlight may lose some of its eating quality in a few weeks or months, depending on the temperature. Now, here's the kicker, okay? Because there just are natural things that occur. So it's going to depend on the kind of food, it's going to depend on where it's stored, and it's going to depend on if you canned it properly. Let's assume that you canned it properly and that it's stored in a cool, dark, dry place, okay? Let's assume those are in there right away. So how long are the nutrients in there? Well, when you cook it, you're automatically losing some nutrients, right? And the heating process during the canning destroys 1/3 to 1/2 of certain vitamins. Those are A, C, thiamine, riboflavin, so you're already losing 1/3 to 1/2 of those vitamins. Once canned, additional losses of these sensitive vitamins are from 5 to 20% each year. Again, it varies. It really depends. The amounts of other vitamins are only slightly lower compared from canned to fresh, but it's going to, like I said, there's a lot to factor in there. So there's no blanket statement, okay? But I think that the easiest thing to go with here is that it's still got a lot of nutrients in it if you store it properly, okay? And you're good for an indefinite amount of time, even though those nutrients do start degrading a little bit. What you're looking for in a emergency situation is calories. You're looking for calories. If it's not an emergency, then you're looking at nutrients and calories, okay? So you have to figure out what you're doing there, what you're putting it up for. But like right now, with everything going on, we're trying to save a few bucks, but we want the best bang for our buck, and that also includes having food that is healthy for us. So plan on 18 months, 2 years, okay? And with the understanding that there is a slight degradation in the nutritional value. Slight. I hope that answered your question. Laura Larson asks, sorry about that. I saw a video where the guy said he cans store-bought milk. Several people in the comments said that they do this too. What's your take? Okay, here's my take. If you enjoy a cold glass of crystal white milk, if you like putting it over your cereal, if you are using it for, I don't know, certain baking things, okay, it's not going to work for you. When you can milk, which is not approved for a number of reasons, it changes the end product. You end up coming out with more of a, I don't want to say evaporated milk, but, kind of like that condensed milk. It changes the color because of the sugar content that's in the milk. So it browns up a bit, beigey, it's beigey milk. And it's not the same product that you would pour out of a gallon and drink. Okay? It's not approved. I don't do it. I have no use for it. if you're looking at putting up milk, seriously, look at getting that Gosner milk that you can pick up at Dollar Tree or any number of other places that's shelf stable. Look at picking up powdered milk. It's great for baking and all that stuff. And with a little finesse and practice is perfectly good to drink. You know, you get used to it. But that's like emergency situation kind of thing. If you're looking to save money on milk because you got it at a ridiculously good sale and the expiration date's coming up, put it in the freezer. Pour a little bit of it off, put it in the freezer, and you can use it. When you go to pull it out, you just give it a really good hard shake, and it's reincorporated, and you can drink it just like you would. So canning milk, not my thing. I know a lot of people do it. I don't see the purpose. It doesn't fit with the way that we use milk. I hope that answers your question. Kathleen Elliott asks, can you pressure can zucchini and squash? And that's a yes and no question. Okay. So, you can cut it into like slices and dices and put it into a jar, add liquid and pressure can it. Yes. What are you going to end up with when you're done? It's really soft. I mean, it's really soft. Okay. If you're looking at having it for something that you can saute later, I think it's too soft. Seriously. It's not something that I enjoy doing for the most part. There are some squashes that I will can up, but you can't puree it because it's too thick. It's too dense to be approved for canning. And then you can't shred it because that's kind of the same issue, and it's pretty much wasted once you pressure can it. You can dice it or slice it and put it in there, but again, it's super, super soft, okay? Probably the best way to deal with, what is zucchini or, squash, depending on which zucchini and squash. I have canned butternut squash in cubes. Again, it's super soft, but, I make it work. But you don't want to puree it, same as pumpkin. So cubes are the best way to do it. De-seed it. You want to get the seeds out. Understand what the end product is, and that's not going to be something that you can necessarily saute. It's great for making a soup later. You drain off the liquid and then puree it up and do your do. But it really depends on what you're expecting, the outcome to be. There are guidelines for it at the National Center for Home Food Preservation. Just be realistic with what you anticipate pulling out of that jar, because a lot of people are disappointed. It's a soft vegetable. It's a very soft vegetable, and it's really good, and I totally understand it. You can freeze it, if you want. I freeze it and shred it and freeze it, thank you, in 2-cup portions for making zucchini bread, that kind of thing. But canning it, it's a lot of time for something that you're going to mush, unless you like making soups and that kind of thing with it. Then it's perfect. So I would recommend dehydrating. I would recommend freezing. For me, and the way that I use squash, my last resort is canning. I hope that answered your question. Celine Bridges asks, I was going through my deep freeze and I found cut up banana peppers and tomatoes. Can I still can them or dehydrate? Absolutely you can. Absolutely you can. I spend most of my summer filling my freezer with random produce, okay? Peppers, tomatoes, anything like that I know that I'm going to be able to use, I will stick in the freezer for when I have time to do it. It's one of the best things to do. And to dehydrate that same way. I take a lot of our peppers and freeze them till I can get to them, and then smoke them and dehydrate them, or just dehydrate them. It just, there's a little more moisture in there because you have frozen it. But other than that, there's no issue at all. So absolutely don't throw those out. Keep them, use them, no waste. Great question. This is a good question that I think some people may have run into. So Retired and Loving It asks, Retired and Loving It, I love it. How much bubbling around the lid can I get away with? Managed several test runs with water without any bubbles, but of course my first time with real food, ugly chicken, about half an hour into the 75-minute cook time, bubbles appeared at 2 spots on the rim. Not much, but enough to see. Too far along to stop, so I let it continue under careful watch. Pressure gauge stayed at 11. The weight jiggled 2 or 3 times a minute as expected. When there was done, there was plenty of water left in the canner. Checked the jars in the morning. The seals were all good. Can I get away with little bubbles? So, Retired and Loving It. My first thing is, I don't know what kind of canner you used, okay? So that would be helpful in answering this a little more accurately, but I mean, you checked all the boxes, okay? If I'm understanding and kind of visualizing what you're talking about, it is a very minute amount of bubbles around the rim, and so it does not appear to have impacted your canning process. You held the pressure, everything sealed great, so you're good. How much is too much? When there's a lot. You know, when you can't hold that pressure. When you can't hold that pressure, that's when there's an issue. And you will see that by your gauge or by your jiggler, that the pressure is not staying where it's supposed to. So definitely watch with that. I think that this is sometimes normal. I know that sometimes my Presto, she gets a little cranky. And so sometimes I'll have a little bit of water that I see, you know, pop out, depending on her mood, but I keep pressure, I keep everything else. So I'm confident that, you know, the end product is going to be safe and good. So I would say that because you checked all the boxes, you're good to go. I hope that answered your question. Thanks. Arizona Mountain Woman asks, how did you store what you can? What is the temperature range that food can be stored at safely? Do they need to be in the dark, or is sunlight okay? She lives in a small house and has been storing her can jars everywhere. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot here. Okay, so how I store mine. I have a room dedicated. We took over a bedroom. I made it dark, so there's very little ambient light at all. It is the cooler room in the house. I've blocked off all of the heat vents. It doesn't get too warm in there in the summertime. If it gets hot enough where I actually turn on the central air, then that room gets cooled off plenty. Typically, the best rule of thumb is anywhere between 50 and 75 degrees are the optimal temperatures for storing your canned goods. You can go higher. I wouldn't go too much lower. You don't want them to freeze, okay? But life happens. I mean, you know, some people live in very hot climates. So do your best to have that the coolest room in the house. Definitely dark. Ambient light can definitely impact the nutritional value of your food, and it'll change how it looks also. So if you were to have your jars sitting out where they're sitting in direct sunlight or indirect sunlight, they will actually fade in color, okay? And it makes them one less appealing, and it does impact the nutritional value of the food. So you really do want dark. That's the best way to keep them as good as possible in the jars. You want dry, obviously, because any rusting of the lid will cause problems. Extra humidity will cause problems. It gets humid in here. You know, it gets humid here in the summertime. So I understand humidity, but if it's like serious humidity, like in a basement or something, you're going to want to keep an eye on those lids. And again, the heat, you know, you have to find the best way that you can to keep it at a decent temperature. If you're looking at 100 degrees or more for weeks at a time, you may have an issue. The seals may not last as long. You may have some that come unsealed. So do what you can to get to that cool, dark, dry place. Somewhere between 50 and 75 degrees, dark. If you're storing them all over your house, throw a cover over them or put them into a Rubbermaid tote or something so that they're not getting the direct light. You know, get creative about where you're storing them. They're pretty to look at, and I get that, but you really do want them tucked away where they're going to have the least amount of damage from the elements as possible. I hope this answered your question. Terry Mitchell asks a really, really great question. How can I tell if my lids are too old to seal properly? She has many that are several years old. You're going to look at the compound, okay? I have lids that I've picked up at garage sales or somebody gave me from, you know, a relative that used to can, and they're old, old lids, and they are still perfectly good. The older lids have BPA in them, which, you know, everyone said to get rid of, and so they did, and that's why we have the newer lids that we have now. The older lids have a thicker compound on them, pre-BPA, you know, days. They have a much thicker compound on them. And in my mind, they grab a lot better. But if that compound, when you pull it out of the box or look at it, if that becomes dry or brittle, it's no good. It won't work. So, and that's even with the new lids. If the compound is dry or brittle, then they're not going to work. So as long as the compound is good and not dried out or cracking, you have got lids that'll work and you are ready to rock and roll. I hope that helps. 58 Kim asks a really great question, okay? She asks, what is the difference between a pressure canner and a pressure cooker? So if you've ever bought a new Presto, I honestly don't know if this is the same with an All-American or not. I'll have to look into that. But on the Presto pressure canner, on the box, it says that it's a pressure canner / cooker. You can pressure cook in a pressure canner, but you cannot pressure can in a pressure cooker. It's just not fair, but you can't. And I know a lot of people ask that question because it's, you know, sometimes they have a smaller pressure cooker that, you know, they could do small batches in and stuff, but there's no way to regulate that pressure. There's no gauge to tell you, you know, what you're doing, whether it is a dial or whether it is a weight. There's no visible way to make that happen. This is not about electric pressure canners or pressure cookers. So this is for the manual ones. So that's the thing, is that pressure cookers are used to rapidly cook meats and vegetables and other foods for a meal. Okay, so it's kind of like the manual version of an Instant Pot. It is the manual version of an Instant Pot. Pressure canners have either the dial or the weighted gauge, and they're necessary to safely can foods that are low acid. The USDA does not have a recommendation or a process for using a pressure cooker as a canner, but like I said, pressure canners can be used as pressure cookers. I know lots of people that use their 23-quart Presto to pressure cook a turkey, you know. It's the fastest way to do it, poof. So that's the biggest difference right there, is that there's just a little makeup, you know, a little bit of their makeup that is different for safely canning food. So stick with a pressure canner, and then you can also pressure cook. That's everybody. That's all the questions. Remember, if you have a question, I love to talk canning. So drop them in the comment section below. And until next time, please be safe.